Welcome everyone to the Tanya Class. It's a special day today also. The chapter we're going to be learning is chapter 25. Today is the yahrzeit of 60th Fisher. It's the yahrzeit of the Rebbe's mother, Rebbe Tzimchana. A remarkable woman. Imagine that she raised a son like the Rebbe. But she was also a remarkable wife. Her husband was Levi Yitzchak, the rabbi of, it's called now Dnipropetrovsk, and it's called Yekaterinoslav, Ukraine. During the communist regime, and he was exiled for his quote-unquote crimes of spreading Torah, maintaining Yiddishkeit, and he was sent to Kazakhstan, to a little village. He was sent away. She came along with him. She prepared ink for him so he could write his thoughts. So chapter 25 is sums up the last few chapters that we've been learning, which in short tell us how we could at any given moment hit the brakes and get in control of our temptations and not let them control us. So this chapter 25, which explains how it's very easy for a person, very accessible, very relevant for each and every one of us to love Hashem, not only to behave in a Jewish way, but also feel Jewish. It's something which is within the reach of every single Jew. So this chapter 25, the Rebbe's father wrote a letter to the Rebbe on the day of his wedding. He instructed him to study this chapter. The Rebbe's parents were not able to participate in the wedding because the wedding was outside of Russia. It was in Poland, and they were stuck in Russia. They didn't let them out. It's a very, very important, very fundamental chapter.
What year was it, the wedding?
The wedding was 1929, or end of 1928.
In Poland.
Kislev, in Poland, in Warsaw. So as an introduction going into this chapter, I want to ask you a question. Imagine if Adolf Eichmann, would come to a rabbinical court in Argentina and say, I regret everything I did during the Holocaust, and I wanted the tshuva, I actually want to become Jewish. How would you react? Huh? You're the rabbi.
He could be lying. How do you know?
Let's say you're convinced that he's saying the truth. He's saying he really feels regret.
Yeah. That's a very tough question.
I haven't seen people who go that low make a reversal. Everything's possible,
everything's possible. So
I haven't experienced that yet in my life.
So I'll tell you a story that's written in the Gemara, or someone which, at least according to the simple meaning of the Gemara, he just did a little math. He killed many more than Eichmann and Hitler. His name was Nebuchadnezzar. He was a general of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was the king who destroyed the first temple. So the Gemara tells us that Nebuchadnezzar, Rabbi Shua and Karcha related that one of the elders of Jerusalem told me that he pointed to a certain valley. In this valley, Nebuchadnezzar, the master slaughterer. It wasn't because he would slaughter chickens. The reason why it was called this name is because he would slaughter people. So he told him in this valley he killed 211 Riba is 10,000, so 10,000 times 211, or 211 times 10,000 actually.
That's over 2 million.
Right? In this valley. And in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem itself, he murdered 94 times 10,000, which is...
Another 900,000.
No, times 10,000.
Oh, times 10,000.
We're talking about
times 94. 100.
94 million?
9,400,000.
9,400,000. Yeah.
Okay.
Till the blood of these innocent people touched the blood of the prophet. Zechariah was a prophet who was telling the Jews prophecies that if they don't repent, then God will punish them. And the Jews didn't like to hear it, so they stoned him, and his blood was bubbling.
Zachariah, this was Zachariah?
Prophet Zachariah, and the blood of these people that he killed finally touched this blood, and it relaxed and it was swallowed on the ground. So after he kills these millions and millions of people, this butcher from Baghdad, we call him, he's from Bavel, has a thought of teshuvah, a thought of repentance in his mind. He thinks to himself, he says, look, if for this one person it took so many people to be killed in order to atone for this person's death, so for all the people that I killed, how much will I have to repay? And he instantly regretted his actions. So he ran away. He calls, and a soldier runs away from the army.
AWOL or something. Absent without leave.
Absent without leave.
He deserted. He deserted, and he sent a will to his family, and he went and converted. And Rabbi Meir, the great sage, was one of his descendants.
He converted to Judaism. He wasn't Jewish?
He wasn't Jewish. He was Babylonian general.
What religion is that?
Babylonian, they were pagan. I'm not sure.
Oh, pagan. So they don't believe in anything.
They believe in many things.
Oh, many things. Okay, so they're not atheists. They believe.
No,
in
they're not atheists, not at all.
Oh, they're pagans.
They believe in many gods.
Many gods. Okay.
So then he became Jewish?
He became Jewish, and one of the great sages of the Mishnah came from him. So, now the story is very disturbing. Yeah, like the example that I gave you. Imagine, I don't know if the court that based on the converted knew that he was who he was, but apparently the Talmud knows who he was, knows that knows what he did, knows that he converted. We do know his identity. So. Yeah, it's a lot worse than Adolf Eichmann converting and becoming a religious Jew.
But that didn't happen.
That didn't happen. But this did happen. So the story is very disturbing, but as disturbing as it sounds, it just teaches us the specialness of the mitzvah of teshuvah. That there's no deed too bad. There's nothing that's unforgivable. Maybe to people things are unforgivable, but to God, there's no act which is unforgivable. As long as there's true regret and true commitment to fix, God will always accept. No one could ever say that God gives up on me, doesn't want me back.
So there are ways, I thought if you were karet, that was it. Karet.
Even karet you could do tshuva for, actually. But the difference, we'll talk about karet soon. The difference of karet and regular sins, other so to speak regular sins, but there's nothing that tshuva cannot. There's no wall that tshuva cannot break.
But what are they returning to? They never had God in their life in the first place. I don't understand that. If tshuvas return to God and they're murderers and they just plunder and slaughter people, cut their tongues out, dismember them, and who are they returning to? They never was with Hashem to begin with.
The soul of every human being, especially a Jew. Every human being, his soul is created in the image of God.
But that's a Jew. That's a Jew, right?
Even Gentiles. The reason why when someone is given intellect, someone's given that intelligence, that makes him, in a degree, close to God. He has a soul. The soul is responsible for its actions. Gets rewarded for good choices, gets punished for bad choices. And that soul, naturally, a person's intellect should lead him in the right direction, obviously to believe in God and to accept God's rules. Now, people sin, no matter who they are, whether they're Jews or Gentiles, no matter how they sin, whether they steal a penny, they get a penny extra change and don't return it, or they kill. How many did you say? We're talking about 211 million plus 999.
Another 900,000.
Yeah. Many people. That is going away. An animal, we spoke about it at length last week. Animals don't have a choice. Some animals are kind animals, some animals are cruel animals, but that's what they are. Human beings, their actions are not predestined. Our actions are up to us. We choose how to behave. And if we misbehave, that means we're going away from God. And there's no sin too big and no sin too small that requires us to return, and no sin too big that could hold us back from returning. Every Jew and every human being, actually, we read in Yom Kippur the story of Yonah. Yonah ran away from God. He didn't want to. He ended up being swallowed up by the big fish. He was actually sent to warn the people of Nineveh, which was non-Gentiles, to do teshuvah, and Hashem accepted their repentance, their teshuvah, their return. So, just what, as disturbing as this tale is of how this mass murder, which did teshuvah, and his teshuvah was accepted, and he even converted. As disturbing as it sounds, it just emphasizes how strong the mitzvah of teshuvah is. That there's nothing. Now, sometimes a person has to accept a lot of suffering to atone for his sins. It doesn't mean that teshuvah means that you can do what you want and then you just say I'm sorry, and it's over. There's consequences, but the fact that Hashem will always accept you is a fact. Hashem could even accept such a murder, and Hashem could accept definitely us who didn't do anything close to that. So, another tale about teshuvah we're talking we're now in what's called the 10 days of repentance, 10 days of teshuvah between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. There was a sage of the Mishnah, his name was Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya, and he got involved in very deep philosophy, but he didn't approach it the right way. And his philosophy, as the Gemara calls it, he took a walk in the orchard, and that's what happens when someone fills up on dessert before he eats his bread and meat. Have you tried that? Eat all the cream, the cream cake and the candy before dinner.
Beforehand.
Yeah. Reads your appetite.
Yeah, it messes things up. A big stomach ache. So, generally speaking, Judaism actually holds very, very much of using our minds to study God as much as we can, which is it's called philosophy, theology. However, it considers it dessert. It calls it a pardes, an orchard of fruit. And before you enter the orchard, before you go over to the Viennese table at the wedding, first eat. First go to the shmorgas. First have the dinner. Then have the dessert. And then you'll enjoy the dessert. You'll enjoy the rest of the meal. You'll be healthy. You'll be fed. If you go straight to the dessert and you skip the basics, then things are bound to mess up. That's what happened to him. It was 4 sages. Only one of them came back in peace, Rabbi Akiva. And the reason is because he entered in peace. Since he came with the right approach, so his study of this philosophy, of this Kabbalah, or whatever it was, the more esoteric aspect of Judaism, he was able to actually benefit from it. But the other 3, each one had a different reaction. So Acher was one of the 3, and his reaction was that he bumped into many questions and many things which did not make sense to him. He didn't understand them properly, and that led him to abandon everything. He became a heretic. He denied, and he sinned all the sins of the Torah. He did everything wrong. All the while being a great sage. Rabbi Meir, you just mentioned, Rabbi Meir was his student. Rabbi Meir kept studying from him even after he became a heretic. And he said, I could eat the fruit and throw away the peel. He was able to understand what's proper and good from his teachings and what's corrupted. But it says that Acher, at one point, Rabbi Meir, his student, told his teacher, he says, Rabbi, why isn't it time to do teshuvah, to return to God? So he told him, I heard a heavenly voice saying, return, O frivolous sons, besides for me. So in other words, he acknowledged that he made a mistake, but he felt that he went too far. He
passed the point of no return.
No return. And that was a mistake. He did hear that voice, but that voice was a test. Sometimes we hear those voices as, we just discourage ourselves. We say, I'm never going to be able to fix this trait or this deed if I hurt someone in somewhat way, or I sinned against God in somewhat of a way. I can't fix it. I can't make amends. Sometimes we tell it to ourselves, and sometimes people like of his level heard a heavenly voice. But the truth is, we have to look what it says in the Torah. Torah says that tshuva is open. There's someone returns sincerely, God, the door never closes. Sometimes you have to bang a few times. Sometimes the tshuva is easier. Certain sins, it says that God makes it a little bit tough because he's testing you to see if you're really sincere. But the gates are never locked. The gates of teshuva are never locked, and they're always open, and you could always return. There's no such a thing as no way back.
Did they say something that even a bat kol we're not supposed to listen to, or we're supposed to when?
In that case, the bat kol misled him.
Right.
It was a test. It was an isayon from God to see if he's, because he sinned in such a severe way that teshuva would not be easy for him. It had to be hard. Sometimes someone does something and you want to accept him back, but you have to make sure he really means it. And he had to overcome that. But the end of the story was that he died in his sinful ways, and his soul was in Gehenna, and it's called in purgatory in hell. And his student Rabbi Meir tried to take him out, tried to save him, but he was so deep that he only was able to bring him to easier level. So he chose in the end to actually throw him deeper, hoping, and that's the truth, that a Jew, no matter how much he sins, he ultimately, you don't stay in Gehenna for long. It says even evil Jews, they stay maxes for 12 months. That's why we say the Kaddish. If someone passes away, we say for 12 months, because after 12 months it doesn't really need the Kaddish, because the soul is cleansed. His soul it took many years actually, more than a regular sinner, because he was a heretic, and taking into consideration his previous status, a rabbi, leader who fell so low. In any case, so I want to finish before we get back to this topic. It all ties in actually. It's about the value of mitzvahs, and I guess what you call the opposite of value. How low a sin could lead us. That's the topic. We're talking about how the topic of the class was, right, why we have to declare twice a day that we're ready to die for God. Yeah, we say the Shema. There's a mitzvah. We say the Shema. The Shema is the words that many Jews, the last words that were on their lips before they gave up their life for Hashem. In the Shema, after we declare that we believe in one God, we say, love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, with all your might. The sages explained the word with all your might, with all your heart, with all your soul. All your soul means even if loving God means to give up your soul, to give up your life, to die, to sanctify God's name. So now there are generations that we understand, like the generation ago, the generation of the Holocaust, many generations really, for probably most of Jewish history, where Jews lived under religions where it wasn't easy to be a Jew. It was very tough. It was was a very big price to pay to act Jewish. So then we needed to remember that you have to give up your life. But Jews like us, thank God we live in free countries, and no one disturbs us from studying Torah, from praying every day, from doing mitzvahs. No one bothers us. So why is it so important that we remember every day that I'm ready to give up my life for God? No, it's not relevant. Thank God. And if we actually think about it, when the mitzvah was given, what was this mitzvah given? When the Jews were about to enter the land of Israel, and the last year they were in the desert, Moshe Rabbeinu gave them, he gave them his last words, his last final blessings before he passed on, and he passed away outside of Israel. But Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jews, in the name of God, that I will place your fear on all the nations around you. The Jews were going in to conquer a land which was not theirs. It was theirs because God gave it to them, but it wasn't under their control, and they had to conquer it. And obviously, when you conquer and you go out to war, there's risks. However, the Jews in that generation they had nothing to fear. Hashem promised them, God promised them that I will make them run away from you. So why did these Jews who were not expecting to face any trials and any tests under Judaism, no one was able to stop them from being Jews, why did they have to declare twice a day, I'm ready to give up my life for God? It wasn't relevant for them either. Just like it wasn't relevant, it's not probably even less relevant than it is to us. So the point that the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, teaches us over here in the end of chapter 25, and that's the final point, which we'll delve deeper into it, is that we're speaking about the short, long way. How to press brakes, how to get in control of my temptations. We all face temptations once or twice or many more times a day to do things that are wrong, the things that are wrong in the eyes of God, the things that are wrong between fellow people, fellow men. So what's this business of? So how could it be? The Torah says at the same time it's very relevant, very achievable for every Jew to serve God and to love God. You tell me it's easy to love God. If I loved God, I wouldn't want to do all these silly things, all these sins that I keep wanting to do. Telling me that it's easy, kikar, it's close, it's achievable, it's relevant to you. So there's different types of love to God. Jews naturally have a love to God, which is natural. That's the way we are. That's why when we're faced with, that many Jews throughout history were faced with a choice, either deny God, accept a different religion, or give up your life. They chose without thinking twice, even if they weren't rabbis and they weren't even people who sinned their whole life. When things were so clear, it's either stay Jewish or stay alive, they said, I'd rather stay Jewish and dead than become not Jewish and live. Behave not Jewish. So now thank God we don't have to give up our life for Judaism, but we have to give up our temptations for Judaism. And the best strategy is think about it. You're facing temptation. Think to yourself, if I was now forced, I was given a choice between my life and my Judaism, what would I choose? My Judaism. So, and I would give up my life. So you can't give up a temptation. You can't overcome yourself. It's not easy. It's much easier than giving up your life. Just to control yourself, to practice some self-control. So that's why Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jews, I want you to declare this twice a day. When you wake up in the morning, when you go to sleep at night. Remind yourself every day, every morning and every evening, I'm ready to give up my life for God. And this knowledge and this declaration gives us the power that, although thank God we don't have to give up our life for God, in our times to be a Jew means to live in a Jewish way, not to give up your life, not to die as a Jew, but to live as a Jew. But if you're ready to die, you should also be ready to overcome different temptations that come your way. That's why the Jews made this declaration back then, and that's why we make it now. Although, just like then, now we don't have that challenge, unlike the many Jews that had it throughout many generations, but we thank God don't have that. But the other challenge, the challenge to overcome temptations, we do have many times a day. And the way to overcome the temptation is to make a little comparison in your mind. Am I ready to die for God? Yes. So then I should also be ready to overcome a temptation. To not say something that something cruel to someone else. To, if I have a chance to make a few dollars and not honestly, I know it's tempting, but if I'm ready not to ready to die for God, I should be ready to overcome this temptation of the $100 or $1,000. Everyone could find examples, the things that his challenges, and make that comparison. I'm ready to die for God. I should be ready to overcome this temptation. So after this, that's actually the bottom line, the end of this topic. But I want to go back to a few ideas that first of all something from chapter 24, which we didn't have a chance to cover properly. We spoke about how every sin, we said that God the only mitzvahs that all the Jews heard directly from God on Mount Sinai were two. One positive one do mitzvah, something we should do, which is believe in God. And the second one, the don't do, was mitzvah of do not worship any other gods, any foreign gods. And the rest of the mitzvahs were given to us through Moshe Rabbeinu, we saw God. Another thing that we all witnessed, that every single Jew who was there present, which we all descend from, witnessed, is that God appointing Moses to be his messenger. So we know that even if we didn't hear it from God, we heard it from Moses, who we saw appointed to be God's messenger. But 2 mitzvahs we all heard from God. And the truth is that these 2 mitzvahs include all the mitzvahs. Because every mitzvah, whether it's putting on tefillin, keeping kosher, praying, studying Torah, giving tzedakah, every mitzvah there's something common to every single mitzvah. The word mitzvah, what does the word mitzvah mean? There's a
commandment,
right?
Yeah.
When you say that I'm observing a commandment, what are you actually acknowledging?
The existence of God.
There's existence of a commander, God. There's an argument. Big rabbis have an argument. Is it a mitzvah to believe in God or not? That sounds a bit strange. Of course it's a mitzvah to believe in God. The truth is, if you think about it, not really. Because it's not a separate mitzvah. It's the underlying core of every mitzvah. If I say this is a mitzvah, I was commanded to do this. There's 248 things that God commanded us to do. I was commanded to do this, that, or the other. That is an acknowledgement of believing in God. There's no separate mitzvah of believe in God, and then how can you command me to believe in God? Who's commanding me to believe in the commander?
The commander. No?
So why is it a commandment?
Well, if he's a commander,
He's commanding you to believe that there is a commander. So there's an oxymoron, right?
Well,
you cannot put it in the you cannot define it as a mitzvah. Belief in God is not a mitzvah, because mitzvah is every mitzvah leans on a belief in God, on a belief in a commander. Then there's commandments. So it comes from somewhere else. It comes from somewhere higher than commandments. Commandments is only once there is that relationship established of a commander and the commanded, then the commander commands to the person who believes in him, this is what I want you to do. A, B, C, D, etc., etc., etc.
but since God's above nature and it's the first experience, I think maybe they have no choice but to believe.
That's exactly the point. We don't. But it's not a commandment.
It's not a commandment. It's something unbelievable.
It's something beyond. It's something that we have either naturally or something that we could.
Maybe that's
could
why
be proven to us.
The souls left their body temporarily. Maybe that has to be the reason.
In order to experience that.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's what happened. God revealed Himself on Mount Sinai.
It's too much.
When God revealed Himself on Mount Sinai, after that He gave us the mitzvahs. Yeah, the revelation. That's the whole foundation of Judaism. It's revelation.
Beyond language.
Appeared.
Beyond language.
It's an experience, like
yeah,
Scott's saying. It's something that you can't deny it.
We all should experience that.
No, I was just thinking about it. A number of years back, I was on King's Highway. I was doing Mitzvahim. I was offering Jews to do mitzvahs. So I got into a discussion. I was quite young, probably 10 years ago already, maybe even more. So I was talking to this kid. So I said, why? It seems like he studied in yeshiva, but he was having his challenges. So I was telling him that proving that Judaism is correct. So I was telling him, we all witnessed it. We were told by our ancestors, unlike other religions, which you have to believe people, that they said that God appeared to them. So they might be lying, they might be saying the truth, but we don't know. But Judaism is something that God appeared to all the Jews that were present, talking about at least 3 million Jews. There were 600,000 men, and there was their wives and their children. And they all experienced it. This is something that there's unbroken tradition that Jews, to this day, the reason why I believe in the Torah is because my father told me that it's true. And he heard it from his father, all the way back to a Jew, which I don't even know his name, who was standing at the foot of Mount Sinai. So he's some ancestor of mine, which I have no idea who he is even. But it's an unbroken chain. The Jewish nation, has this. We're not relying on one prophet or 11 prophets or who say that God said something to them. We're relying on something that we all saw. We all saw God appointing Moses as His prophet. So whatever Moses said, we believe. because we saw that that mission being given to him, and we saw the revelation ourselves. So this boy was telling, maybe it was just maybe Moses knew how to make, like today you do fireworks and sound systems, so then they didn't know about it, so they were all very stupid, and he was very smart, so he made a show.
Hollywood.
He made a big Hollywood production. So imagine for primitive people, he makes a Hollywood production. They'll believe whatever you say. So I tried to argue with him there and back, but over time I realized that revelation is not just the fire and the sounds. It's an experience. An experience. Hollywood production can't make an experience. It could maybe give you a shock, give you some awe, but to feel a revelation of God is not something that could be really made up in any way.
Passed on in a movie, shown in a movie.
Shown in a movie or shown in a production. It's something that you experience, you feel it. Anyway, so the truth is that the two mitzvahs that God gave us at Mount Sinai include all the mitzvahs. We said whenever you observe a mitzvah, a commandment, you're acknowledging the existence of a commander. And by failing to do what the commander says, whether or not you agree with it or understand it, it doesn't really matter. But the moment you accept that there's a commander, and you accept his rules, his mitzvahs, and you just choose not to do any mitzvah, whether it's a big one or a small one, let's say it's a person chooses not to keep Shabbos, or he chooses to steal a penny, which in his eyes seems very unimportant, no big deal, it's just a penny. The guy gave me extra change, he gave me extra $1. I don't have to go give it back to him. No big deal, it's $1. Right? The truth is that it doesn't really matter how bad it sounds to you or how important or unimportant it sounds to you. The fact is that God made rules, and by you breaking one of those rules, by not doing what he said, or by doing what he said not to be done, you're actually denying the in a subtle way the commander. You're saying that there's something else besides God. There's God, and he said his things, and I want to do my own thing. And if God is not in charge of every aspect of your life, in essence, he's not in charge of any aspect of your life. If there's one aspect where you could behave with a different agenda than the agenda of the creator of the world, that means you're denying it. So some people deny it, in a very clear way, and sometimes it's subtly. Sometimes you yourself don't realize it. That's the Yetzer Hara's trick, the evil inclination. He tells us, you could do this and stay Jewish. It's not like you're going to church. You're just stealing a penny. But the truth is, if God said don't steal pennies, so by not listening to that commandment, you're denying God's authority. And if you're denying his authority, you're actually rejecting the whole thing. Whether or not you see it that way, that's the reality. The Yetzer Hara, what his trick is to make us see it differently. That's his profession, to make us blind to the reality.
It's a trick.
That our actions create. That's his trick. And he's very good at it. Many times a day, he lures us into that trap. So that was the topic of chapter 24. And we said that someone who does that is worse than the klipa, than the negative, than the things that are not kosher. Because things that are not kosher, things that are bad, that God created them bad, so they're bad. It's true that they're bad. It's true we should stay away from them. But they're being bad because God made them bad. Being bad by creation, by design, is not something wrong. It's just bad. And those who have choice should stay away from it. A not kosher animal is not kosher. So it's bad. It has a certain unholiness to it. But a Jew, or any human being actually, especially a Jew who chooses to be bad, when he has the choice to be good or to be bad, and he chooses to be bad, he's worse than something that's bad by creation. If you're bad by choice, you're worse than that. That's what we're saying. When someone just breaks one rule, one mitzvah, he's becoming very distant from God. He's separating himself from God. He's denying the whole thing. So a point that the Alter Rebbe goes into, which is an interesting discussion. It's quite deep. It's a little more technical than inspirational at first glance, but it's important, and that's why it's actually part of the text. So in Judaism, there's something called a principle in Judaism, which is you don't do a mitzvah usually if it means that it's going to affect your life. There's a rabbi now coming to Yom Kippur. There's sometimes people that cannot fast on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a mitzvah to fast. Someone that it would be dangerous for him to fast. He said there was once a rabbi, Chaim Briska, a very good rabbi, lived about over 100 years ago. Passed away about 78 years ago. So he was, whenever people came to him with questions about fasting on Yom Kippur, people that had a hard time, so he was very lenient. He said, don't fast. He was generally lenient about it. So they told him, we hear you're very lenient on the matter of Yom Kippur. So he said, no, I'm actually very stringent on preserving life. That's how he looked at it. So the Torah says, "V'chaybem," I want mitzvahs to be something that you'll live by, which means that if a mitzvah will make someone lose his life or endanger his life, which could lead to loss of life, then you don't do the mitzvah. There's a bigger mitzvah than doing mitzvahs is to be alive. And the reason behind it, the basic reason is because God wants you to do more mitzvahs. If now doing a mitzvah less will keep you alive so you can do more mitzvahs in the future, that's more important. Sanctity of life is probably the most important mitzvah in Judaism, to protect life, your own life, other people's life. Besides your 3 sins, that it says, so that's the rule is very simple. There's 613 mitzvahs. 610 of them, if doing the mitzvah means losing your life or putting yourself in great danger, which could lead, if you're not sure for sure, but it has that chance, then the Torah wants you to give up to not do the mitzvah. If someone has a heart attack, to drive a car or an ambulance on Shabbos, it's not allowed. If someone has to be rushed to the hospital to get the best treatment, then we put Shabbos aside and we save that person's life. It says that we don't ask the rabbis should do it. People should understand that it's not, that it's just as important or even more important. What happens but there's 3 sins there's 3 mitzvahs that rule doesn't apply. The first one is idol worship. Second one is taking someone else's life. The third one is adultery. The person is told, bow down to this idol, or murder this person, or behave in an adulterous way. He's in these cases he is commanded to actually give up his life. The principle of life is above all doesn't apply over here. The 3 cardinal sins. Now, let's in light of what we were discussing, how every mitzvah in essence is, whether it's a big mitzvah, big avera, or a small one, in essence is actually just as bad. It's separating from God. They said when God said don't serve idols and believe in God, that included all the mitzvahs. Do everything that will bring out that you believe in me, and don't do anything which will bring out that you don't believe in me. That's to say, it's all really the same. So why in light of this teaching, of this concept, why is it that life comes before mitzvahs? If a person lives in order to do mitzvahs, so what's the difference? Why is it that when it comes to idolatry or adultery or murder, I'm supposed to give up my life, and what's with the rest of the mitzvahs? It's just as bad. Right? We said every mitzvah is equally problematic. Every mitzvah is equally important. Every sin is equally problematic. Why is that so? Where do we take that differentiation from? So the Alter Rebbe tells us over here, it's not because there's bigger sins and smaller sins. You want to know why? it says that if there's a Jew who does not keep Shabbos, it usually means he does it on purpose. Someone who knows what Shabbos is and he decides not to keep Shabbos. You cannot, when it comes to, he cannot slaughter kosher meat. You cannot trust him. Yeah. Same, and obviously someone who doesn't believe in Judaism at all, someone who serves idols. Yeah. He's not trusted with slaughtering, with kosher slaughter. A person has to, for kosher slaughter, a person has to keep Shabbos and he has to obviously believe in God. But what happens if this person keeps Shabbos, excellent, but he's known that he's very unfaithful in his marriage. Yeah, he's known to be a sinner in this field. One of the three.
Yeah.
Shabbos is not one of the three. Shabbos, it says a person should desecrate Shabbos in order to save his life. When it comes to Gilui Ariyot, adultery, the person is commanded to give up your life and not commit adultery. So when it comes to Shabbos, we're not one of the three sins. Someone who's not trusted, doesn't keep Shabbos, you cannot trust his shechita, his slaughtering. But someone who's known to be an adulterous person, we could trust his shechita.
Why?
So just the reason why, we don't know. The Alter Rebbe says it's called Gzeres HaKasuv. There's something about Judaism that Judaism in general makes a lot of sense. If you think about different mitzvahs, even those that at first glance seem a bit archaic, old-fashioned, think about it a little bit, read some books, you'll find that they all make sense. Now, the danger with everything making sense is that...
I wouldn't trust them. I wouldn't trust an adulterer to cut my meat. Because it's dirty to begin with. I personally would have a problem with it.
It could be, but halachically there's no problem with it.
Okay. He washes his hand 10 times. What does he do?
He's wearing gloves. That's not an issue of dirt. It's the issue if he's reliable in this field. So now the reason why these three sins you're supposed to give up your life, and the rest you're supposed to give up the mitzvah in order to live. Now, obviously, the reason why we give up the mitzvah in order to live is because we want to do more mitzvahs. Then there's three sins that for some reason God decided that I don't want you to make this calculation. If I'm going to bow down to the idol now and I'm not going to really mean it, I'll be able to do many more mitzvahs. Or if I kill this person, or if I lie with this woman, I'll be able to do many more mitzvahs. Now, here we don't make that calculation. Why these three? So, as I was saying, so since Judaism overall makes sense, in order for us to remember that it's divine, so God puts in things that don't seem to make sense, that no human being, even someone as wise as King Solomon, cannot understand. It says King Solomon, he thought he understood a few mitzvahs, so we're given to king, and he ended up erring, even though he thought he knew the reason. He thought he could outsmart God, and so to speak, on his level. Obviously, he wasn't a simple man, and it ended up happening to him, even though he knew what to be aware of. So that a king's not allowed to have many wives, not allowed to have many horses. And he didn't listen because he knew why. Not many horses, you might return to Egypt. Not have many wives because they might make you go astray from God. And the happening was that the horses and the wives did do exactly what the Torah said, even though he assumed that he could overcome it. But the mitzvahs have reasons, but God, once in a while, plants something which is beyond our knowledge, and no one could rationalize, in order for us to remember that it's, even though you understand, there's a lot more to it that you don't understand, and that's why you have to keep it, because God said, whether or not you understand it. So that's Gzeres HaKasuv, but the proof that it's not big or small, the fact is that an adulterous person could be, which is one of the three big, you could trust this shechita, someone who doesn't keep Shabbos, which is not one of the three, where a person is told to desecrate Shabbos to save his life, but if someone desecrates the Shabbos, obviously not to save his life, you cannot trust this shechita. So we see that it's not really so clear why these three. It's not because adultery is greater than Shabbos. Shabbos seems greater than adultery. Someone who doesn't keep Shabbos cannot be trusted. Someone who's is adulterous could be trusted when it comes to shechita. So we see that it's not not so simple. It's not because these three are bigger. If you think about it, you could. I was preparing the class. I thought that perhaps the avodah zarah, the idolatry, makes sense because that's the whole foundation. But still, you could argue, and I'm doing it just externally, right? It says that if someone does, for example, someone who was coerced to idolatry, and he should have given up his life, and if he didn't, we don't punish him for it. We say that he was coerced. We don't punish someone for something that was coerced. He did something wrong, but us as a community, we have to accept him back. We don't consider him an apostate, someone who left. We know that he did it by force. But the person himself made the wrong decision in this case. But it's between him and Hashem, not between him and the community. The community doesn't punish him for it because he was forced into it. Lost my train of thought. What was I saying? So you think that so avodah zarah, you could say, idolatry. Someone he's denying everything. He's pulling the rug from under his feet, the whole foundation. Or murder. So why is your blood redder than his blood, than the other person's blood? Why should you be allowed to take his life to save your life? And you could say a similar thing with adultery. That if it's a sin that involves yourself, then it's one thing. But if it's a sin that involves another person, it might be different. But you could go on, and you could look at it all different ways. The fact is that these three are not necessarily the greatest three. Shabbos in one way is greater than adultery, and Shabbos still the person's supposed to give up his life. So there's the fact is that it's beyond our understanding. It's called Gzeres HaKosov. It's a decree of God. So that's one point that the Alter Rebbe clarifies over here. So don't let this division of the three sins and the rest make you think that there are bigger sins and smaller sins. Every sin is equal. One proof, one of the mitzvahs that are from the big three, if a person does it, you could trust the shechita. And the mitzvah that's not from the big three, that you can't trust the shechita. So it's nothing to do. Every mitzvah is big. That's one point. We don't know exactly why these three were chosen. Another point. Says the Alter Rebbe that another challenge to this premise that every sin is equally bad because it separates you from God is look at the Torah has different punishments. Different punishments for different sins. Some sins a person is stoned. Some sins a person is burnt. Some sins he's beheaded. Some sins he's strangled. Some sins are less severe. You only get lashes. Some sins you have to pay a fine. Monetary. Some sins you just have to give a carbon, give an offering to God, bring an animal, and some sins is just say I'm sorry in your heart. So you tell me that there's no such a thing as big sins and small sins. Look, there's sins that you could lose your life for. There's sins that you get beaten for. There's sins that you have to give a fine, and there's sins that you just have to say I'm sorry to God, confess. That's all. So of course there's levels in sins. So the Alter Rebbe tells us a very important thing we have to remember. There's the act of the sin itself, and there's the effect of the sin. There's a famous, I think I mentioned it before, so I'll mention it in short. Famous mashal about a rich man who came back from the big city, bought a big fancy chandelier, he hung it up in his house, invited everyone to the party, wanted to show off his big chandelier, all the fancy crystals. And during the preparations, a poor lad knocks on the door, says, I need some clothing, so they send him up to the attic, some old coats, take whatever you need. And he needs a piece of rope to tie, and he snips the rope that was holding up the chandelier. Right? So that's the famous part of the story. There's another part. So when the chandelier collapsed, the owner comes up and he sees the guy all shocked, So he takes away his hat. Says, look what you did, you destroyed it. I know you don't have anything to pay back, so pay me at least what you own, your hat. So we told him the hat is worth pennies, the chandelier is worth thousands of dollars. What does it help? He says, he didn't mean to break the chandelier. He meant to take a piece of rope. He should have asked permission before he takes rope. So he was going to steal rope. How much is a yard of rope cost? It cost what his hat cost. So I'm only taking back from him what he intended to steal, not what he actually damaged. So there's a sin, there's what is sin itself, which every sin is equal. Every sin is denying the commander of the mitzvahs, or failing to do a mitzvah. It's equal. And that's what it said, that God, when God said that those two, believe in God and don't worship idols, he included the entire Torah in those two sins, because every sin is really an offshoot of that. Every mitzvah is an offshoot of believing in God. That's one thing. And then there's the effect that the sin has. Different sins having a different effect on the world. That's 100% true. Not all sins are the same. The effect, every sin is the same. In the aspect of you rebelling against Hashem, against the giver of the mitzvahs. But the effect of the sin is very different. Every sin is different. And that's why some sins, the way to fix the cause, what the sin caused to the world, is capital punishment. Some it's lashes, some it's a fine, and some it's you just have to confess and ask God for forgiveness. But the sin itself, the sin itself, what happens after the sin, there's levels. But the moment that you are sinning, or let's look at it in the positive, the moment that you're doing a mitzvah, now also mitzvahs, some mitzvahs give a person big reward, some mitzvahs give them less reward. There is differences, because some mitzvahs affect the world stronger, some mitzvahs affect the world less. But the mitzvah itself, every mitzvah is in its core is the same, and every sin is in its core is the same. The effect is very different. Every mitzvah varies, every sin varies, and that's why the reward and the punishment could be very different. Some are just, I'm sorry, some are, you have to give up you have to lose your life for it. But that's also actually a kindness of Hashem. Hashem is